Got a big show with Jay coming up this Saturday, Old Ox Brewery in Ashburn. Excited to have Jay there. If you haven't gotten your tickets, go ahead and get them.
What are you waiting for? What are you doing that you're not buying tickets immediately right now, Ashburn? Come on.
I'll immediately go off script. I saw something on Eventbrite where they did a breakdown across the world of like 12 different types of shows and like when people bought tickets. And the comedy vertical ranked dead last as people bought the latest when they were getting their tickets.
And you know what? It's very similar to how people date in this world. They go like, well, if I got a doctor, I'm going to lock down a doctor immediately. So let's do that. And then they go like teacher, and then it's like garbage man, and then it's like unemployed garbage man, and then all the way down after the guy who cleans up after the Tijuana Donkey show. They go, oh, you know what? Comedian, I'll marry him because that's the least stable job. So please support us.
Well, I think, Jay, you've done pretty well for yourself. I know you've done a few shows with us, but just for people who have been living under a rock and have not met Jay Black yet, he was originally a teacher, which we'll get to in a second, turned nationally touring comic, turned Hallmark, Lifetime, Netflix, Amazon movie writer and producer and actor, which kudos to yourself for writing yourself into the play or into the show. I would absolutely always do that. Yes. Toured all over Europe, hosted the U.S. Army's I Am Strong tour, College Comedian of the Year, MSNBC Radio. You have your newest album is on SiriusXM now, Spotify, iTunes. Check it out there. And you've done, 12 movies, I think?
Yeah, so I think there's been 10 movies that have come out. We have 2 that are currently in post-production. So it'll be an even dozen by the end of this year. Unlucky number 13 goes into production soon. So we're doing that. And you know, when you spell out all the stuff that I've done in like one thing like that, it sounds pretty impressive. If you wouldn't mind, Steven, calling my wife and just going like, hey, do you know all the things that Jay's done? And then just run it down. She'll probably still not be very impressed, but it would be nice to give it the old college try, you know?
I'll send her the marketing materials. Like, I think they look good with the nice, like, headlines, like, you know, Jay Black as seen on Hallmark. I mean, I assume women across America love you for like 9 weeks every November and December for Hallmark Christmas movie season. I know we never miss a Saturday premiere at our house. So
the women across the country love me. Men who are forced to watch the movies with their wives, maybe not so much. But yes, and I always try to write myself in. Not as much anymore because obviously I'm old and fat. But when I was still acting a lot, I would always write myself a part. And the part I would write myself, because I'm Jay Black, I'd always write a single syllable name plus a color. So I played Hank Green. I played Matt Brown. And you can always tell the part that I was angling for because, you know, I'm not super creative when it comes to names. So that's what I would always do.
I wouldn't sell yourself short now. And you don't have to respond to this since you work for Hallmark. But clearly in the last few years, there's been a shift away from like you couldn't be less than 105 pounds. So you can be like 120 now.
Yeah.
So I think you could definitely still be in the show.
Yeah, so, well, maybe not me. I could, at this point, just looking at myself in this video, I could play like the unemployed brother of the guy who owns the cookie shop where the romance takes place. So, like, sure. I kind of like amble in and go, these cookies are delicious. And then I leave and they go, please don't let him come back. That would be the role that I would play. But yeah, so I've been doing these a lot. I've been lately shifting over to Lifetime movies and producing them myself. So, you know, I raise them, I write them, I raise the money, produce them with my company, Exit 19 and 13th Floor. And then we sell them to Lifetime. And we've done number 6 is finished and number 7 starts soon. So we've done a ton of those.
That's fantastic. I have no sense of how that process goes.
Well, you know, it's one of those things that, and part of the show, part of what we're going to talk about on Saturday is this idea that there's a gulf between where we think we can go and where we are. And that gulf is a lot smaller than we imagine it to be, you know, because we think, oh, I got to live in New York. I got to live in LA, or I got to know somebody, or I got to be super talented. The people who are doing this are very talented, but my guess is you're very talented too. Like we all, it's a skill that can be learned. It's not like you're touched by the gods to do this stuff. It's a learnable skill, just like anything. And it's not to take anything away from the people doing it, but the idea of all of this is if you want to live a little bit in this world in a professional sense, it's doable. Not, you don't have to change your whole life to do it. It can be done sort of on the side as well. So that's what I talk about.
Tell us a little more about this show. You're kind of talking about your journey from teacher to comedian to actor, movie writer, right, producer.
So it is half stand-up, half TED Talk. It is, an autobiographical tale. It's going to be very funny. It's going to be more story oriented. How I started as a high school teacher, how I left to go do stand-up comedy, some of the stories that were involved in my life as a stand-up comic, some of the stories as a teacher, and then getting into this Hallmark realm and this Lifetime realm of writing these movies, how that occurred. But then the second half is a little bit more of a practical discussion of how these things are made, how they're done, the process by which you see these shows. Because, one of the things I always talk about in my show is I know you guys sit and watch and go, who the heck writes this stupid stuff? Right? And it's if you've ever had a question about the process of these things, and there's lots of stuff that you don't even think about, right? Which is, why don't you ever see a dog in these movies, Lifetime movies especially? Because they're very expensive. When you do,
I never thought about that.
Right. If you bring a dog in, I got to hire a trainer for that dog. And I also have to pay somebody from the SPCA. If you've ever seen we made sure that no animals were harmed on this. I got to have somebody on set. If I had a movie that took place in literally this much water out on the ocean, we had to hire a lifeguard for the whole day to sit and watch. I don't have any kids under 18 in my movie, because if I bring in a kid under 18, I got to hire a child advocate. You know what a child advocate is? A child advocate is somebody that you hire to make sure that the kid doesn't do anything bad. And I don't mean bad like bad. I mean, like, if you wanted to say, oh, we're going to make this kid take a fake punch because there's a bully going to fake punch this kid. And you go, the child advocate, because the mother of the kid will generally go, oh, sure, yes, I'm a stage mom. Please throw my kid down a flight of steps. The child advocate is literally somebody that you hire to go, please, he's not doing that. You're not going to have him in this stunt. He's not, to make sure the kid is never put in danger. But I pay for the child advocate, right? So all of these things where you sit there and you might go, what's going on with this movie? How come it doesn't feel necessarily in a world that I recognize? There are certain economic constraints that always come in that make, if you want to make budget. So these are the things that you don't think about, you don't see. And I'm going to explain when you're watching those movies what might be happening backstage to make it like that.
Yeah, I'm going to be the smartest person at this November's Hallmark Christmas movie kickoff.
Well,
this year, right?
Well, it's not just, it's partly it's like learning all that trivia, like how does that happen? But partly too is what I really hope. Listen, I still live in New Jersey, right? This is not, I know it looks like a Hollywood mansion. It isn't. This is a suburban home in New Jersey. I was a high school teacher. I live like literally a mile from where I grew up. My wife lives a mile from her family. When I left to go be a comedian, my wife said, I'm not leaving New Jersey. So all of this was done not in Los Angeles, not in New York. It was done in my home. And one of the things that I would hope, if you walk away from this at all, is that if you've ever had an inkling towards doing this, that it would be an inspiration to at least finish the project you're working on and take a shot with it. My goal isn't to get you to toss your life away and move to Branson, Missouri in the hope that you're going to make a Hallmark movie. My hope is that if you've ever had an idea in your head, that I'll help you reach the end of that idea and maybe find something to do with it.
What came first? When did you leave teaching? Did you become were you full-time comedian first, or were you writing, or was it same time?
So I was a full-time comedian first. The comedy, and I'll talk about this. Lucas and I had the same college agent. That's how I met Lucas. Yeah. So I wound up leaving teaching to do that. But the thing about being a comedian is you have a lot of downtime, right? And I was like, well, I'm not making quite enough money to get a drug addiction. So what can I do where I'm not going to be, I have all these hours to fill? Because seriously, you do a week in Vegas. I'm going out to Vegas in September, and I love it. But literally, the headlining slot is 35 minutes in Las Vegas. So I have 23 hours and 25 minutes a day to fill. And my wife is home with 3 kids. So if I call my wife up and go, oh, it was a real rough day, the pool was pretty crowded, I'll be rightfully so. My wife will divorce me and possibly stab me. So I started trying to fill those days with, a little bit of discipline and a little bit of work. And, just started banging out screenplays. And, what I always say is some years I'm a comedian that is a writer and producer. And some years I'm a writer and producer who's a comedian on the side. It just depends on which one pays me more money.
What I am fascinated in, I do not know like a ton of comedians nationally, but I now know 3 people who were teachers and now tour as comedians. And I didn't have a single damn funny teacher in my, I had a bodybuilder as a teacher, a former soccer player. I didn't have a single funny person ever. And yet now I know 3, like, what was your, I know Lucas's story. What was your like moment where you're like, shit, I'm done with this teaching?
Well, in all honesty, I'll tell the longer version of this on Saturday. I got on to Showtime. I did a Showtime stand-up special called White Boys in the Hood. And I talked at length about maybe some sexually related stuff. And I didn't know how many people had Showtime. So I walk into school the following Monday and the kids are like, Mr. Black, were you on TV last night talking about your wiener? And I was like, I don't know who you're talking about. But it wasn't me. And, my boss at the time was like, hey, what are you doing here? And I was like, yeah, you're right. If I'm going to be on TV, I should probably maybe take a look at this. And luckily, I had just done a NACA where I got like 65 colleges. And if you don't know anything about the economics of stand-up, that's like 2 years of teaching salary. So I was like, all right, well, if I don't, even if things go south after 2 years, I'll go back to teaching. But I have a nice 2-year cushion here. So I turned in my resignation. And this is no lie. Literally 2 weeks after I turned in my resignation, my wife was pregnant with our first kid. And
you were like, let me take these benefits and flush them down the toilet. I don't need them.
Throw it away.
Yeah. Who needs this? Babies are very cheap.
Well, and the thing is, you want to talk about like the little timings of your life. I know for a fact I would never have left had it been the other way around. Had it been like 2 weeks after she got pregnant, I thought to myself, maybe I should leave. I never would have left. I'd still be a teacher. Right. My wife probably much happier because I'd still be a teacher. But the luck of the timing of it all was such. And every year when I make the money I would have made as a teacher doing stand up and writing, I have a little party for myself. And sometimes that party's in February. And sometimes it's like December 31st, and I've been having stomach aches the entire year. But so far so good.
That actually, what we typically before shows interview comedians, ask them 5 questions, ask all the same. But one actually just came up when you decided you're like, some kid saw me do a wiener joke. I need to leave. Who was the first person you told that you were leaving? And like, what was their reaction? Was it your wife? Was it the principal? Like,
so it was my wife. And, in all honesty, the amount of energy I was putting into doing both. And I'm sure Lucas knows that last year when you're like, you finish your job on a Friday, you get into a car and you drive 9 hours to Maine. And you're just sitting there like, how much Red Bull can I drink and still be alive? Like, she knew the level of tension that I was at. And I was just like, hey, if I leave, is that all right? And she said, yes. She was very supportive. The hardest person to talk to was my dad, who, when I told him I wanted to be an English major, thought that was a dumb thing. Because my dad was a banker. He was like, what are you going to be? Vice president of poetry interpretation at a big company? What? Yeah. English major. So telling your dad you're leaving a job you can set your watch to go, tell fart jokes instead of strangers, like he was just like, I don't know the economics of how any of this works, but good luck to you. So that was the tough one.
That is funny. Yeah, God, from banker side, you could not have picked a series of like squishier,
Right.
like less defined careers.
It's funny. Over the pandemic, I got a piano, and I've been teaching myself piano, and I'm good enough that
As one does.
yeah, well, I'm good enough that if you're good at piano, I can play with you, and we can sound good together.
Wow.
But if you're
Wow.
but you have to be good. I'm not that good yet. But anyway, when I perform on the ships, they have dueling pianos there. So I got friendly with the dueling piano guys, and they let me sit in and play dueling pianos with them. And it's a lot of fun. Yeah, I have a video of it. It's great. It's my favorite thing. And one of them pulled me aside. It was the greatest compliment. They were like, Jay, you're actually pretty good at this. If you like spent a year practicing, you could probably be good enough that if you did the ships, you could get contracted to do both, where you're going to do the piano and get double pay doing comedy. And my eyes got real wide. I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. So I got home and I told my wife, and I don't know if she had a gun handy or if she's so Italian that she looked at me and I thought she had a gun. But either way, she was like, you're not doing another stupid career that's even less soluble than the ones you're already doing. I went from teacher to comedian to screenwriter. We're not doing musician as well. And I had to be like, you know what? You're right. No, that was on me. That's a dumb idea on my part. So you say you have 5 questions. What are the 5? Let's go. I want to do this. I'm ready.
All right. So we got the first one. Next one. You almost had one for dueling pianos there, but I am curious of the best backhanded compliment you've gotten after getting off stage. The kind of like, oh shit, you were funnier than I thought you'd be.
Yeah, so I have one. It's not off stage. It's from my wife. You know that comedian Matt Rife? You see him everywhere now, right? If you're on Facebook, scroll down 2 things. Matt Rife will be there. He's everywhere right now. So my wife was like watching a TikTok of his, and he's like a super handsome guy, right? He's like all built and he's young and he's like the new Dane Cook. All the girls love him. So my wife's looking at him, and she looks up at me and goes, this guy, you're funnier than this guy. You'd be a lot more popular. You'd be popular like he was if you were only, and then she trailed off. And I was like, if I was only what, honey? And she was like, nothing. And I was like, if I was only good looking, is that what you were going to say? And she was like, I was going to say better looking, but I mean, like, look at him. He's so handsome. That's what's good. So I don't know anything about Matt Rife. That isn't a backhanded compliment of Matt Rife. He might be the best comedian ever, but my wife thinks he's hot and I'm not, and it's hurting me emotionally. So that's.
But I'm gonna send her some more of your accomplishments, as we mentioned earlier. Like, if you're pretty enough to be in a Hallmark movie, I mean, like, what else can you do? But
I am the best friend. They stand me next to the good-looking guy, and they look better in comparison.
Well, hey, everyone needs it. At least you're not to the point of the Hallmark and Lifetime movies where you're this super old guy who's giving like the sage advice at the end of the movie. Like that's next stage.
I'm not the guy who might be Santa Claus.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. No one is confusing you for Fat Santa yet. So,
right.
So, next question that I'm always curious about, I get this from public speaking as well, but like, what have you done? Everyone at some point is just absolutely frozen on stage, right? Mm-hmm. Like the next thing that's supposed to come out of your mouth here is like, shit. Like what did you do in that moment? Like what was your reaction to just standing in there in front of all those people and just being like, I've got nothing in my head right now?
So I have a story about this. I was performing. It was like way early on. It was actually in Virginia. It was in Norfolk. I was at the old Comedy Zone in Norfolk, Virginia.
Yeah.
And it was this Sunday show, which is a papered show. And I'll give you a comedy term. Papered is when the bar or the comedy club gives out free tickets because they want to sell booze, right? Yeah. So for a comedy club in a lot of ways is just a booze delivery system. The comedy is arbitrary. So if they don't sell enough tickets, they will paper the room. And it's well known that papered shows are difficult shows. And that's because psychologically you don't value what you don't purchase. So if you get a free show, your initial thought is, how could this be good? Even if it's not conscious, you feel it, right? So I was doing a papered show. I was middling. and I was barely holding on all week. And it was like I was doing a 30-minute slot. And I was this show on Sunday. I was failing so hard. I would tell a joke. There'd be a pause. No one would laugh. And just as I was moving on to the next joke, this guy, and I'll never forget, he had a big cowboy hat and a belt buckle, the size of a silver platter. And he started fake laughing at everything I did. So I tell the joke, why chicken cross the road? Get to the other side. Blank. I start to move on. Anyway, and then he'd be like, ah, 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 like that. And then the whole audience would laugh at him. And I remember I tend to get dry mouth when I'm nervous. So I could feel the cotton mouth coming out like that. And I could feel the jokes leaving my head. And I just remember looking at him going, you know what? I'm staying. I'm not going to get off early. I'm going to do my full 30. And I could not remember a joke. So I just started talking about how my career was over. It was basically therapy. And again, he would fake laugh. Even then, he stopped fake laughing at a certain point. I think he just felt bad. Like he thought this was going to turn into something bad for me. And I remember I was driving home. I was on the Chesapeake Bay Bridge crying like that. And I said, one day I'll come back to Ashburn, Virginia as a headliner. And I did it. Look, I'm
and you did it.
The 15th.
You're back at a brewery, right. But like
That's
a really nice brewery.
A good one, not the one that I was at. Yeah. So that was my dry mouth moment.
That also kind of sounds like the question we ask about a worst venue that you have been to.
I'll just say this is a blanket statement as an answer to this question. There's a thing called a bar gig. And a bar gig is hard to begin with, but it's worse when no one knows a show is coming. You know, like when you know it's bad when they've like contracted to do a show for like a Thursday night. It's all filled with regulars. The show didn't attract anybody, so it's not like there's new people there to see the comedy show. And that moment when the bartender shuts the TVs off and you hear everyone curse in unison, right? That's when your stomach starts to hurt. You know, oh, this is gonna be bad, guys. And I say you're not a real comic unless you're sitting at a bar and there's some part of you that's worried that the bartender's gonna come over and go, so you guys ready? Because that's oh god, I don't want to do it. I know it's gonna go bad. It always goes bad.
That's not setting you guys up for success.
No, but you know what? Those knocks, that's what grows the callus over your soul that allows you to continue doing this.
I'll ask you two more questions. One is kind of just for you, and then we'll finish with our last one. More nervous about to go on at the MGM Grand in Vegas, or lights, camera, action for a movie, and you've got like 2 lines to deliver. Which is
movie. Really? Yeah, by far, because the MGM Grand comedy. When if you get good at comedy, even when it fails, it's good, right? Like if there's a heckler or somebody drops a plate of glasses or you forget your opening line and you stop and go, well, I forgot my opening line. I've already messed up the show. People will laugh and it'll be fine. And they'll go, oh, I can't believe he on purpose forgot his opening line as a way to make it, nobody knows. But when you have especially one that I'm producing, I know what everybody costs. And honestly, you only get like at the speed that we film, I try to shoot between 8 and 12 pages a day. So right. And well, I have to be because every day costs me thousands of dollars. So we only get 3 or 4 takes. And if I mess up, I've let not only, there's no way like I can gloss over that mess up in a way that makes it better. So the level of nerves goes up a little bit more when I'm doing an acting gig.
That is really true. So final comment. This a little bit for us, but also for the comics as well. 99% of the people who are going to come to like our show on Saturday and shows in general, like they watch comedians on YouTube or something, but in general, like their mind is like there are comedians, there's like Kevin Hart and Jimmy Fallon, and there is everyone else, and like they don't really know that in between. And there's a huge difference between the guy you see at like Comedy Zone performing and like Jay Black and Lucas Bone and those kind of guys,
Right.
like who are professional national touring comics. Like how do you talk about the difference? Like when someone asks you.
So yeah, it's funny because when I moved into this cul-de-sac here, everybody's like, "So what do you do?" And I'm like, "I'm a comedian." And they're like, "Oh, that's awesome, super cool. But what do you do?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm a comedian." They're like, "Yeah, but like that's a fun thing you do on Thursday night open mics. But what do you do?" So there is, and this is honestly part of the thing that I think stops people from trying to do some of the stuff that they want to do. They think that there is internationally famous, well-known, and then there's wannabe. They don't understand that there's not a vast middle class, because there's probably like 1,000 people in the country and we all know each other, but there is a middle class that can hold enough people that make a full-time living at this, that it isn't scrounging. It's not like living out of your car. Sometimes, there's a little bit of a stomach ache that comes with it, but you are at the top venues, and there are nights at those top venues where it is Jimmy Fallon, and you open for Jimmy Fallon, but then the next week you might be headlining your own show there, because there's not 52 weeks worth of celebrities. There's got to be those other weeks. And it's like the corporate shows or the college shows, when the thing I always say that separates like the group that I'm in versus maybe a group that hasn't quite gotten professional yet is there are comics that, like Lucas and Mike, those are guys you hire when you can't have a failure, when you are booking your one comedy show for your charity or your organization or your college or your business, where you're like, we're doing the company party in May. I got to hire a guy that isn't going to be dirty if we tell him not to be dirty, and will make everybody laugh and no one will be upset. Those guys get paid a lot of money to do that, because that skill set is very rare. So that's the group. We're the group that you hire when you don't want a failure to happen. That's the way I like to put it.
Y'all are funnier, and this is just my bias, than 99.999% of anyone who ever picks up a microphone. Like, you guys are just absolutely top tier. And if you didn't say it, you stole my line. I'll say it the other way, of just like, I think what separates, there is no such thing as a bad show. If there's 3 people in the audience, or if you guys were opening for Taylor Swift, you guys would do the same show. You see the same thing in professional sports. There's that huge difference between that, the professional baseball player, and then the guy who's the triple A guy, or the guy who never makes it out of high school, right? There's just that sheer consistency of just being so good every time you see them at that like major league level. And that's where you guys are at. So I always like to try to give people the opportunity to like talk about that, because, I think the more people that know, like you said, probably this group of 1,000 people are just absolutely fucking hilarious. And hopefully we can spread them out to more folks.
I like the MLB comparison. Like, think of me as a utility infielder. I'm on the team, and I'm gonna get every ground ball that comes my way, but I have not signed a max contract yet. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm sitting there watching the NBA, and I'm harassing this guy who missed a layup, and like in reality, I couldn't get within 5 feet of scoring a single basket against this guy. Like the level of talent is so different. And so hopefully people will come out Saturday and the other shows. Jay, I think, is it jblack.tv? Plug
jblack.tv. Yeah, just you see my name down here, take the space out, and then put a .tv at the end, and all my shows are there. You can watch a clip of my stand-up. You can see some of the trailers to my movies. And what I'll say is, this Ashburn show is a special show. This is not just stand-up. My goal is, at the end of this show, you're going to know something about how these movies are made. Don't worry, fellas, you can come too. It's not just going to be me talking about, and another thing about Marguerite Moreau, and you go, who's that? I don't care. This is just it's going to be funny, but it's going to be informative, and I'm going to show you, I hope, how maybe, if this is something you've thought about doing, the steps you can take to make it happen.
Nice. Well, we're excited. Hope everyone comes and checks out Jay this weekend. Check out his YouTube page. Check out his videos. Absolutely hilarious. One of the best comedians out there. looking forward to seeing you Saturday.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.